You don't belong here. Turn around and find a Walmart. Security guard Kurt Langford planted himself in front of the gleaming mall entrance. His short-sleeved uniform stretched tight across his chest as morning sunlight streamed through the glass doors behind him. Tyler Morgan adjusted his simple green t-shirt and dark jeans, the leather portfolio under his arm, containing documents that would change everything. Langford's radio crackled as he called for backup, his voice loud enough for the gathering crowd of shoppers to hear. "Sir, I'm going to need you to step away from this establishment before we have a problem." His hand rested on his belt, fingers drumming with authority he thought he had. Tyler met his eyes calmly, while tourists and families slowed their approach, phones already emerging from pockets. The security guard had no idea he was about to humiliate the man who signed his paychecks. Welcome to Frost Folktales. This is where we tell the stories of those who were underestimated, dismissed, and targeted, yet chose courage over silence. If these stories move you, subscribe and be part of a community that refuses to let them fade into the background. Tyler Morgan had arrived at Premier Plaza Mall at precisely 9:30 that Tuesday morning. His mental checklist focused on the quarterly assessment he conducted at each of his properties. The fluorescent lights cast bright illumination across the polished marble floors as early shoppers began filtering through the entrance. He'd chosen his most casual clothes deliberately. The simple green t-shirt and dark jeans would help him blend in as just another customer, allowing him to observe how his staff truly treated people when they thought no one important was watching. He'd conducted these undercover visits at 17 of his 23 mall locations over the past 2 years, always learning something valuable about customer service, staff performance, and the real culture of his businesses. Today's visit to Premier Plaza was supposed to be routine. He'd planned to spend 3 hours walking the corridors, visiting stores, observing security protocols, and perhaps grabbing lunch in the food court before revealing himself to General Manager Robert Fenn for their scheduled afternoon meeting. Instead, he found himself facing Kurt Langford's hostile stare. The security guard stepped closer, his boots squeaking against the polished floor. "I said move along. This isn't the kind of place for your type. We've got standards here, and I'm paid to maintain them." His voice carried across the entrance area, causing more shoppers to pause and stare. Tyler noticed a middle-aged woman in a red dress, fumbling for her phone, her children pressing close to her sides as they watched the confrontation unfold. Tyler kept his voice steady and respectful. "I'm here to shop, just like everyone else. I have every right to enter this mall." He shifted the leather portfolio to his other arm, feeling the weight of the ownership documents inside. The irony wasn't lost on him that he was being denied entry to a building he'd purchased for $47 million just 3 years ago. Langford's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "Rights? You think you have rights here? This is private property, friend, and I decide who belongs and who doesn't." His radio crackled again as he pressed the button. "This is Langford at the main entrance. I need backup for a situation." Individual refusing to comply with directions to leave the premises. The crowd around them had grown larger. Tyler counted at least 15 people now, their conversations dying as they focused on the confrontation. He recognized the look in their eyes. Some showed curiosity, others discomfort, and a few displayed the kind of knowing recognition that told him this wasn't the first time they'd witnessed something like this. A teenage boy in a mall uniform stood near the information kiosk, his face troubled as he watched Langford's aggressive posture. Tyler made a mental note of the young man's obvious discomfort with the situation. Behind the group of onlookers, he spotted an elderly woman in a blue jacket shaking her head with clear disapproval. "Look," Langford said, taking another step forward until he was less than 3 feet from Tyler. His breath smelled like coffee and cigarettes. "I'm trying to be nice about this, but you're starting to test my patience. We both know you can't afford anything in there anyway. Save yourself the embarrassment and find somewhere more appropriate for someone like you." Tyler felt the familiar burn of injustice in his chest. The same feeling he'd carried since childhood when teachers assumed he couldn't read, when store clerks followed him through aisles, when police officers pulled him over for driving cars they thought he couldn't own. But he'd learned long ago that losing his temper would only make things worse. Instead, he let his calm dignity speak for itself. "I understand you have a job to do," Tyler said, his voice carrying clearly in the bright atrium. "But that job is to provide security for all customers, not to decide who deserves to shop here based on how they look or what they're wearing. Langford's face flushed red. Don't lecture me about my job, pal. I've been keeping undesirables out of this mall for 6 years, and I know trouble when I see it. You're not getting past me, so you might as well save us both some time and leave voluntarily. The word undesirables hit the crowd like a physical blow. Tyler saw phones rising higher, heard the distinctive sound of video recording beginning. A woman near the back whispered something to her companion about calling the police themselves. The teenage mall employee had moved closer, his expression shifting from discomfort to outright distress. Tyler opened his mouth to respond, but Langford cut him off. And another thing, the security guard continued, his voice rising. I don't know what kind of scam you're running with that fancy portfolio, but it's not going to work here. We've seen it all before. People like you trying to look important, pretending to be somebody you're not. Well, I see right through it. The leather portfolio suddenly felt heavier in Tyler's hand. Inside were documents that would instantly resolve this situation. Corporate letterhead, ownership certificates, his business license, even photos from the mall's grand opening ceremony where he'd cut the ribbon alongside the mayor. One phone call to his assistant Christine would bring immediate vindication. One conversation with General Manager Robert Fenn would see Langford terminated within the hour. But Tyler found himself curious about how far this would go. How deep did this attitude run in his organization? How many other customers had been treated this way? How many incidents had been covered up or ignored? This was more than just one racist security guard. This was a window into systemic problems he needed to understand fully before he could fix them. Sir, an elderly voice called from the crowd. The woman in the blue jacket had stepped forward, her weathered face set with determination. This young man hasn't done anything wrong. He's been perfectly polite and respectful. You're the one causing a disturbance. Langford spun toward her, his authority challenged from a new direction. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to mind your own business. This doesn't concern you. It concerns me when I see someone being treated unfairly, Eleanor Cross replied, her voice stronger than her slight frame would suggest. I've been shopping at this mall for 15 years, and I've never seen such behavior from security. Tyler felt a surge of gratitude toward the stranger willing to speak up for him. He also noticed how quickly Langford's demeanor shifted when confronted by an elderly white woman, still dismissive, but without the overt aggression he'd shown toward Tyler. The teenage employee finally approached, his mall nameplate reading Brandon Walsh. Excuse me, Mr. Langford, he said quietly. Maybe we should just let him shop. He seems like a regular customer to me. Langford's anger found a new target. Walsh, get back to your station and stay out of this. When I want advice from someone making minimum wage, I'll ask for it. Brandon's face reddened, but he held his ground. I just think you're paid to think about restocking brochures and giving directions, not security policy. Langford snapped. Now move along before I write you up for insubordination. Tyler watched the exchange with growing interest. The security guard's pattern was becoming clear. Different levels of hostility for different people, but underlying contempt for anyone who challenged his authority. This was exactly the kind of toxic behavior that could poison an entire workplace culture. The radio on Langford's belt crackled with an incoming transmission. Langford here, the guard responded. This is Rodriguez. I'm tied up with a shoplifting incident in the East Wing. What's your situation at main entrance? Individual refusing to leave after being asked multiple times. Langford replied, his eyes never leaving Tyler, potentially escalating to trespassing. Tyler almost smiled at the complete mischaracterization of events. He hadn't been asked to leave. He'd been ordered to find a Walmart. He hadn't refused anything. He'd simply asserted his right to enter a public accommodation. The lies were building into a narrative that would justify whatever Langford decided to do next. The crowd around them had grown to nearly 25 people. Tyler could see the mix of emotions playing across their faces: anger, embarrassment, fascination, and fear. Some were clearly recording, their phones held high to capture every word. Others seemed uncomfortable with witnessing such blatant discrimination but uncertain about how to respond. A woman in workout clothes approached the edge of the crowd, her phone already streaming live. "This is unbelievable," she said to her camera. "I'm watching a security guard refuse to let a black man enter Premier Plaza Mall for literally no reason. This is happening right now, in broad daylight, with dozens of witnesses." Langford noticed the live stream, and his posture stiffened. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop recording and move along. I'm on public property, and I have every right to document what I'm seeing," the woman replied firmly. Her viewer count was climbing rapidly as comments flooded in from people sharing the stream. Tyler felt the situation reaching a critical mass. Soon there would be too many people, too much attention, too much chaos to resolve quietly. He could end this with a phone call, but each passing minute revealed more about the culture of discrimination that had been allowed to flourish in his business. Langford's hand moved closer to the radio, ready to escalate further. His face showed no doubt, no hesitation, no recognition that he might be making a catastrophic mistake. The security guard was absolutely certain he had the authority and the right to keep Tyler Morgan out of Premier Plaza Mall. Tyler adjusted his grip on the leather portfolio and waited to see what would happen next. The morning sunlight continued streaming through the glass doors behind Langford, illuminating a confrontation that would change everything for everyone involved. The crowd pressed closer, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. The crackling of Kurt Langford's radio cut through the morning air as his backup call echoed across the mall's bright atrium. Overhead fluorescent lights mixed with natural sunlight streaming through the glass ceiling, illuminating every detail of the unfolding confrontation. Tyler Morgan stood calmly near the entrance, his green t-shirt and dark jeans a stark contrast to Kurt's imposing security uniform, while curious shoppers began gathering at a respectful distance. Within minutes, heavy footsteps approached from the mall's interior corridor. Mike Rodriguez, another security guard, wearing the same navy blue uniform with short sleeves, emerged from behind a cluster of potted plants near the fountain. His hand rested uncertainly on his radio as he took in the scene, brown eyes darting between Kurt's aggressive stance and Tyler's composed demeanor. "What's the situation here, Kurt?" Mike asked, his voice carrying a hesitant tone that suggested he wasn't entirely comfortable with what he was witnessing. Kurt straightened his shoulders, clearly emboldened by the arrival of backup. "This guy here thinks he can just waltz into Premier Plaza like he owns the place. I told him there's a Walmart down the street that's more his speed, but he won't take the hint." Tyler's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, but he maintained his dignified posture. Several shoppers had now stopped their morning routines, forming a loose semicircle around the confrontation. The soft murmur of their conversations mixed with the gentle splash of the decorative fountain, creating an oddly peaceful backdrop to the escalating tension. Mike's eyes flickered with uncertainty. "Look, maybe we should just let the man explain what he's doing here. He doesn't seem to be causing any trouble." "Are you serious right now?" Kurt's voice rose, drawing more attention from passing customers. "Rodriguez, this is exactly the kind of bleeding heart attitude that lets these people think they can go anywhere they want. This is a high-end shopping center, not some community center." The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud, and Tyler watched as Mike's expression shifted. The hesitation in the younger guard's eyes gradually gave way to reluctant solidarity with his colleague. Tyler had seen this dynamic countless times in his years of business leadership, the way peer pressure and institutional culture could corrupt individual judgment. "I understand. There may be some confusion," Tyler said, his voice calm and measured despite the growing crowd. "If I could just speak with your supervisor or the general manager, I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding quickly." Kurt let out a harsh laugh. "Misunderstanding? The only misunderstanding here is you thinking you belong in a place like this." As if summoned by the escalating voices, the sharp clicking of high heels on marble echoed from the main corridor. Sandra Holloway emerged from the administrative offices, her red blazer bright under the fluorescent lighting, matching red skirt, completing her authoritative ensemble. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her pale blue eyes immediately locked onto Tyler with undisguised suspicion. "What exactly is going on out here?" Sandra demanded, her voice carrying the unmistakable tone of someone accustomed to wielding power. I could hear the commotion from my office. Kurt's posture straightened even more as his supervisor approached. Mrs. Holloway, this individual is refusing to leave the premises. I've explained to him multiple times that this establishment caters to a different clientele, but he's being completely uncooperative. Sandra's gaze swept over Tyler from head to toe, taking in his casual attire with obvious disdain. The crowd of onlookers had grown to nearly 24 people, their smartphones emerging from pockets and purses as the situation became increasingly dramatic. "Sir, I'm going to need you to leave immediately," Sandra announced, her voice deliberately loud enough for everyone to hear. "Premier Plaza maintains certain standards, and we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our establishment's expectations." Tyler reached slowly into his back pocket, producing a leather wallet. "Ma'am, I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. If I could just show you my identification and explain why I'm here." "I don't care what kind of fake ID you're carrying," Sandra interrupted, her voice growing more hostile. "This is a high-class establishment, not some street corner where you can loiter and cause disruptions." The gathered crowd began to murmur more loudly, several shoppers exchanging shocked glances at Sandra's blatant hostility. Tyler noticed an elderly woman in a blue jacket shaking her head in disgust, while a young mother with 2 small children had begun recording the interaction on her phone. "Ma'am, with all due respect, I haven't caused any disruption," Tyler replied, his voice remaining steady despite the growing injustice of the situation. "I simply attempted to enter the mall for legitimate business purposes, and your security team immediately blocked my access." Sandra stepped closer, her red blazer almost glowing under the bright lights. "Legitimate business? What possible legitimate business could you have in a place like this? Do you see the caliber of customers we serve here?" She gestured dramatically toward the well-dressed shoppers who had gathered to witness the confrontation. The crowd's murmur grew more agitated, with several voices expressing disapproval of Sandra's behavior. Tyler could see phones being raised higher, multiple angles now documenting every word and gesture of the unfolding scene. Mike Rodriguez shifted uncomfortably beside Kurt, clearly recognizing that the situation was spiraling beyond reasonable security measures. "Miss Holloway, maybe we should just let him show his ID and explain what he needs." Sandra's head snapped toward Mike with sharp disapproval. "Rodriguez, your job is to support your colleagues' decisions, not to second-guess established security protocols. This individual has already been asked to leave, and he's refusing to comply." Tyler opened his wallet deliberately, revealing several cards and official-looking documents. "I'm more than happy to provide identification and explain my presence here. I'm requesting to speak with the general manager about some important business matters." "The general manager doesn't meet with random people who wander in off the street," Sandra declared, her voice dripping with condescension. "This is Premier Plaza, not a public library where anyone can just walk in and demand meetings with management." The crowd had grown significantly, with more than 30 people now gathered in the bright atrium. The natural skylight above cast everything in clear detail, ensuring that every moment of the confrontation was being captured in high definition by multiple recording devices. A well-dressed woman in her 40s stepped forward from the crowd. "Excuse me, but I shop here regularly, and this man hasn't done anything wrong. He's been nothing but polite, while you've been incredibly rude." Sandra whirled around to face the customer, her red outfit making her look like an angry beacon under the bright lights. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step back and allow us to handle this security matter. Your interference is not helpful." "Security matter?" the woman replied incredulously. "This man asked to speak with a manager, and you're treating him like a criminal. I'm filming this because it's absolutely disgraceful." More voices from the crowd joined in, expressing similar sentiments. Tyler watched with growing concern as Sandra's behavior became increasingly erratic and hostile, not just toward him, but toward the paying customers who dared to question her authority. "This is exactly the problem," Sandra announced loudly, addressing the entire crowd. "When we try to maintain standards in our establishment, people want to make it about discrimination instead of simple business policies. This individual clearly doesn't belong in a high-end shopping environment, and everyone here knows it." The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelmingly negative. Voices rose in protest. Phones were raised higher, and Tyler could see the situation becoming a full public spectacle. He realized that Sandra's behavior was revealing something much deeper than individual prejudice. This was institutional discrimination that had clearly been normalized at this location. "Ma'am, I'm formally requesting to speak with the general manager," Tyler said, his voice carrying a new note of authority that made several nearby shoppers look at him with increased attention. This situation has escalated far beyond reasonable security measures. Sandra's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "The general manager is not available to meet with every person who thinks they can demand special treatment. You need to leave this property immediately, or I'll be forced to call law enforcement." Tyler's expression remained calm, but something shifted in his posture that suggested depths of composure being tested. "You're threatening to call the police because I asked to speak with management?" "I'm threatening to call the police because you're trespassing on private property after being asked repeatedly to leave," Sandra replied, pulling her phone from her red blazer pocket. "This is your final warning." The crowd's energy shifted dramatically, with many voices expressing outrage at the escalation. Tyler looked around at the faces surrounding him, seeing genuine concern and anger from customers who were witnessing what they clearly recognized as discriminatory treatment. Kurt stepped forward, emboldened by his supervisor's aggressive stance. "You heard Miss Holloway. Time to go, or we'll have you arrested for trespassing." Mike Rodriguez looked increasingly uncomfortable, but remained silent, trapped between his personal instincts and institutional pressure. Tyler noticed the internal conflict playing out on the younger guard's face, recognizing the moral struggle that many good people faced when confronted with systemic discrimination. Sandra began dialing numbers on her phone, her movements deliberate and theatrical. "I'm calling the police right now. You have about 2 minutes to leave voluntarily before this becomes a much bigger problem for you." Tyler watched Sandra's finger hover over the final digit, realizing that the situation had moved far beyond simple misunderstanding into territory that would require much more significant intervention. The bright morning light streaming through the glass ceiling seemed to illuminate not just the physical space, but the true nature of the discrimination that had been allowed to flourish in his own business. The crowd pressed closer, phones recording every moment, as Sandra completed her call to law enforcement. Tyler Morgan remained perfectly still, his mind already calculating the comprehensive changes that would be necessary once this situation reached its inevitable conclusion. The morning's bright promise had transformed into something much darker, but Tyler knew that sometimes the deepest problems required the harshest light to expose them completely. The morning sunlight streaming through the Premier Plaza's glass ceiling created an almost theatrical spotlight on the escalating confrontation. What had started as a quiet discriminatory encounter was rapidly transforming into a public spectacle that would ripple far beyond these marble floors. Tyler Morgan stood with quiet dignity in the center of the growing circle, his green t-shirt and dark jeans a stark contrast to the opulent surroundings of his own mall. His leather portfolio remained clutched in his hand, the ownership documents inside representing power that no one could imagine. The fluorescent lighting overhead cast sharp shadows as more curious shoppers abandoned their morning routines to witness what was unfolding. Tara Nolan pushed her shopping cart closer, her 2 young children peering around her red blouse with wide, confused eyes. She had been heading to the department store when the raised voices caught her attention. Now, watching Kurt Langford's aggressive posturing and Sandra Holloway's increasingly hostile demeanor, something deep within her sense of justice ignited. "Mom, why are they being mean to that man?" her 7-year-old daughter whispered. Tara's jaw tightened as she watched Tyler Morgan's patient attempts to explain his presence being dismissed with waves of Sandra's manicured hand. Without hesitation, she pulled out her smartphone and opened her social media app. "Because sometimes people need to see the truth," she murmured, hitting the live stream button. The phone's camera captured the scene in real time as Tara began speaking to her growing online audience. "I'm at Premier Plaza Mall right now, and what I'm witnessing is absolutely disgusting. This man is being harassed by security for literally trying to enter the mall." Her voice carried across the atrium, and Sandra Holloway's head snapped toward her with predatory focus. "Excuse me, ma'am, but this is a private matter. Please put your phone away and move along." This stopped being private the moment you decided to humiliate someone in public. Tara replied, her live stream counter climbing as viewers began sharing the feed. This man has done absolutely nothing wrong. Kurt Langford's face reddened as he noticed other phones emerging from the crowd. A group of teenagers had stopped near the fountain, their devices recording from multiple angles. An older businessman in an orange shirt and blue jacket stood behind a pillar, his phone discreetly capturing audio. "I said no recording," Kurt barked, his hand moving instinctively toward his radio. "This is a security situation, and you're all interfering." Tyler Morgan watched this interaction with growing concern, not for himself, but for his customers. These were people who came to his establishment expecting safety and respect, and instead, they were being threatened by his own security team. He made mental notes of every face, every aggressive gesture, every violation of the customer service standards he had personally established. From across the atrium, Eleanor Cross witnessed the commotion with mounting indignation. At 73 years old, she had seen enough injustice in her lifetime to recognize it instantly. Her blue jacket rustled as she walked with determined steps toward the confrontation, her cane tapping against the marble floor like a drumbeat of approaching justice. "What exactly is this young man accused of?" Eleanor demanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades as a high school principal. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like harassment." Sandra Holloway turned her attention to this new challenger, her red blazer seeming to intensify under the bright lighting. "Ma'am, this individual is trespassing and refusing to leave the premises. We've asked him multiple times to shop elsewhere." "Shop elsewhere?" Eleanor's voice rose with incredulous anger. "This is a public mall. He has every right to be here." The crowd was growing larger, and Tyler Morgan could see the division forming among the witnesses. Some shoppers hurried past with uncomfortable expressions, clearly wanting to avoid involvement. Others lingered with obvious concern, their faces showing a mixture of outrage and helplessness. Brandon Walsh stood frozen behind the information kiosk where he worked part-time, his orange polo shirt and blue vest marking him as a mall employee. At 19, he had witnessed enough discrimination to recognize it, but his position left him feeling powerless. He wanted to speak up, to defend Tyler Morgan, but fear of losing his job kept him paralyzed. "This isn't right," he whispered to his coworker, a young woman who was equally distressed by the scene. "They can't treat people like this." "What are we supposed to do?" she whispered back. "Sandra will fire us if we interfere." Meanwhile, Tara's live stream was gaining momentum. The viewer count had climbed past 500, with comments flooding in expressing outrage and demands for action. She narrated what she was seeing, her voice steady despite her anger. "The security guard is now threatening customers for recording. The supervisor in the red jacket just told an elderly woman to mind her own business. This is absolutely unacceptable behavior." Kurt Langford was becoming increasingly agitated as he realized the scope of documentation occurring around him. His usual tactics of intimidation were failing spectacularly in the face of modern technology and community solidarity. "All of you need to disperse immediately," he shouted, his voice echoing off the glass ceiling. "This is a private security matter, and interference will result in your removal from the premises." "Remove me then," Eleanor Cross replied defiantly, planting her cane firmly on the marble floor. "I've been shopping here for 15 years, and I've never seen such disgraceful behavior from staff." Tyler Morgan felt a mixture of pride and concern, watching this elderly customer defend him at personal risk. This was exactly the kind of community spirit he had hoped to foster in his malls, but seeing it emerge in response to his employees' discrimination was deeply troubling. Sandra Holloway stepped closer to Eleanor, her demeanor becoming increasingly threatening. "Ma'am, if you continue to interfere with our security operations, you will be banned from this establishment. I suggest you reconsider your involvement." The collective gasp from the crowd was audible. Threatening to ban a loyal elderly customer for defending someone against discrimination crossed a line that even the most uncomfortable witnesses couldn't ignore. Did everyone hear that? Tara announced to her live stream audience, now approaching 1,000 viewers. "They're threatening to ban customers for speaking up against obvious racism. This is happening at Premier Plaza Mall right now. More phones appeared as Tara's announcement spread through social media shares. The hashtag she had created was beginning to trend locally, drawing attention from people across the city. Comments poured in with support for Tyler Morgan and condemnation of the mall's behavior. Tyler Morgan observed this digital uprising with fascination and concern. He was watching his reputation being shaped in real time, not by corporate marketing strategies, but by the authentic reactions of people witnessing injustice. The irony wasn't lost on him that his own customers were fighting harder for his dignity than his own employees. A young father, holding his toddler, approached the edge of the crowd. His expression conflicted. "This doesn't seem right," he murmured to his wife. "Maybe we should say something." "I don't want to get involved," she replied nervously. "What if they call the police on us too?" This whispered conversation represented the internal struggle many witnesses were experiencing. The desire to do right battled against the fear of consequences, creating a tension that Tyler Morgan could feel radiating through the crowd. Kurt Langford made a critical error by focusing his aggression on the recording devices rather than de-escalating the situation. He approached a teenage girl who was filming from near the jewelry store, his hand outstretched, demanding she stop. "Give me that phone right now. You have no right to record on private property." "Actually, she does," called out a voice from the crowd. A man in a green shirt and blue jacket stepped forward, revealing himself to be a local attorney who recognized the legal implications unfolding. "This is a place of public accommodation, and she has every right to document what's happening." This legal intervention shifted the crowd's energy dramatically. People began to understand that they weren't just witnessing discrimination, they were documenting potential legal violations. The phones stayed out, and more appeared as people realized the significance of what they were capturing. Tyler Morgan made a decision that would define the rest of this encounter. He could end this immediately by revealing his identity, but doing so would prevent him from fully understanding the scope of the problem within his organization. He needed to see how far this discrimination would go, how many employees would participate, and how the systems he had established would respond to testing. "I appreciate everyone's support," he said calmly, his voice carrying clearly through the atrium. "But I don't want anyone to put themselves at risk on my account." Eleanor Cross looked at him with admiration. "Young man, standing up to injustice is never a risk worth avoiding. That's how we got into these situations in the first place." Her words resonated through the crowd, strengthening the resolve of those who were wavering. Even Brandon Walsh felt a surge of courage, though he remained constrained by his employment status. Sandra Holloway was losing control of the narrative and the situation. Her attempts to disperse the crowd had backfired, creating more attention and more documentation. The live stream was being shared across multiple platforms, and she could see mall employees from other stores beginning to gather at the edges of the crowd. "This is your final warning," she announced loudly, pulling out her own phone. "If this disruption doesn't end immediately, I'm calling the police to clear everyone out." The threat hung in the air like a challenge. Tyler Morgan knew that police involvement would escalate everything to a potentially dangerous level. He also knew that it would provide the ultimate test of how his establishment handled discrimination under official scrutiny. Tara continued her live stream commentary, her viewer count now exceeding 1,500 people. "They're threatening to call police because customers are documenting their discriminatory behavior. We're not causing any disruption except holding up phones." The community had formed around this moment of injustice, with technology amplifying their collective voice beyond the physical boundaries of the mall. Tyler Morgan realized he was witnessing something unprecedented. His customers organizing spontaneously to protect the values he had tried to instill in his business. The next few minutes would determine whether this became a teachable moment or a dangerous escalation. But one thing was certain. There was no going back to the quiet discrimination that had clearly been occurring in his establishments. The bright morning light continued streaming through the glass ceiling, illuminating a confrontation that had grown far beyond anyone's expectations, with consequences that would soon ripple through every level of Tyler Morgan's business empire. The sound of heavy boots echoed across the marble floor as Officer Mike Brennan pushed through the crowd that had gathered in the mall's central atrium. His long-sleeved navy uniform was crisp and pressed, the golden badge catching the bright fluorescent lighting from above. The natural skylight streaming through the glass ceiling illuminated every face in the growing crowd, creating an amphitheater effect around the confrontation. Sandra Holloway immediately rushed toward the officer, her red blazer billowing behind her as she moved with urgent theatrical gestures. Her face was flushed with a mixture of anger and vindication as she pointed directly at Tyler Morgan. "Officer, thank goodness you're here," Sandra Holloway said breathlessly, her voice carrying across the atrium for everyone to hear. "This man has been causing a disturbance for over 20 minutes. He's been aggressive, threatening our security staff, and refusing to leave private property, despite multiple warnings." Tyler Morgan felt his chest tighten as he watched Sandra Holloway craft her narrative with practiced ease. The leather portfolio in his hands suddenly felt heavier, containing documents that could end this charade instantly. Yet he remained still, observing how quickly the story was being twisted. Kurt Langford stepped forward, adjusting his security belt with authority as he addressed Officer Mike Brennan. "Sir, I approached this individual when he was attempting to enter our establishment inappropriately dressed and acting suspiciously. When I politely asked him to leave, he became belligerent and started making threats about owning this place." The security guard's voice carried a tone of wounded professionalism, as if he were the victim of an unprovoked attack. Several people in the crowd shifted uncomfortably, their phones still recording as the official narrative began to solidify around them. Officer Mike Brennan looked between the security team and Tyler Morgan, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his duty belt. The crowd's presence seemed to make him more cautious, but Sandra Holloway's authoritative presentation was clearly influencing his initial assessment. "Sir, I'd like to hear your side of this," Officer Mike Brennan said to Tyler Morgan, though his posture remained defensive and his tone suggested he had already begun forming conclusions. Tyler Morgan stepped forward calmly, his green t-shirt and dark jeans a stark contrast to the uniform surrounding him. "Officer, I appreciate you taking the time to investigate this situation thoroughly. I'd like to speak with you privately for just a moment to explain what's actually happening here." Before Officer Mike Brennan could respond, Sandra Holloway interjected with sharp urgency. "There's nothing to explain privately, officer. This man is trespassing on private property. He was told to leave multiple times and refused. I'm requesting immediate arrest for criminal trespass and creating a public disturbance." The crowd murmured as Sandra Holloway's demands escalated the situation beyond simple resolution. Tara Nolan adjusted her phone's angle to capture the interaction while whispering urgently to her live stream audience about the injustice unfolding before them. Tyler Morgan maintained his composure, despite feeling the walls of false narrative closing around him. "Officer, I have identification and documentation that will clarify this entire situation. I'm asking for just 2 minutes of your time to review the facts before any arrests are made." Kurt Langford scoffed loudly, ensuring his voice carried to the surrounding crowd. "He's been claiming he owns this mall, officer. Clearly delusional behavior. We deal with this type of individual regularly, who think they can intimidate their way into establishments where they don't belong." Officer Mike Brennan was nodding along with the security team's version of events when the crowd suddenly parted to allow another figure through. Detective Laura Simmons approached the scene with measured steps, her sharp eyes immediately assessing the dynamics at play. Detective Laura Simmons wore a professional gray pantsuit that commanded respect, and her presence immediately shifted the energy of the confrontation. She surveyed the crowd of recording phones, the agitated security staff, and Tyler Morgan's calm demeanor with the practiced eye of someone who had seen similar situations before. "What do we have here, Mike?" Detective Laura Simmons asked Officer Mike Brennan, but her attention was clearly focused on the broader scene rather than just the security team's narrative. Sandra Holloway rushed to intercept Detective Laura Simmons before Officer Mike Brennan could respond. "Detective, we have a trespasser who's been causing problems and threatening our staff. We need him removed immediately before this situation gets more out of hand." Detective Laura Simmons raised her hand slightly, a gesture that commanded silence from everyone present. She looked around at the crowd, noting the dozens of phones recording every moment, and seemed to recognize that whatever happened next would have consequences far beyond this single incident. Sir, Detective Laura Simmons addressed Tyler Morgan directly. Can you explain to me what brought you to this location today and how this situation developed? Tyler Morgan felt a moment of relief as someone in authority finally seemed interested in hearing multiple perspectives. Detective, I came here today for business purposes. I have identification and documentation with me that explains my legitimate reason for being here. When I attempted to enter, I was immediately stopped and told I didn't belong, despite having every legal right to be in this location. Kurt Langford stepped closer to the officers, his voice taking on an urgent tone. Don't let him manipulate the situation, officers. He's been spinning stories for the past half hour. First he claimed he was shopping, then he said he had business here. Now he's claiming he has some kind of documentation. The story keeps changing. Detective Laura Simmons studied Kurt Langford's aggressive posture and Sandra Holloway's impatient demeanor before turning back to Tyler Morgan. May I see this identification and documentation you mentioned? Tyler Morgan reached slowly into his leather portfolio, ensuring his movements were clear and non-threatening, given the tension in the air. He withdrew his driver's license and several official documents, handing them carefully to Detective Laura Simmons. As Detective Laura Simmons began reviewing the documents, Kurt Langford immediately moved closer, peering over her shoulder. Those could easily be faked, Detective. Anyone can print up official-looking papers these days. We can't just take some random person's word based on documents he's carrying around. Sandra Holloway nodded vigorously in agreement. Exactly right. We have security protocols for a reason. This individual doesn't fit the profile of someone who would have legitimate business in our establishment. The documentation is obviously fabricated. Officer Mike Brennan seemed swayed by the security team's arguments and stepped closer to Tyler Morgan. Sir, I'm going to need you to place your hands behind your back while we sort this situation out. We'll verify the documentation at the station. The crowd's energy shifted dramatically as the threat of arrest became immediate. Tara Nolan's live stream exploded with comments as viewers watched the situation escalate in real time. Eleanor Cross pushed closer to the front of the crowd, her elderly voice cutting through the tension. This is absolutely disgraceful, Eleanor Cross called out loudly. That man has done nothing wrong, and you're treating him like a criminal, based on nothing but prejudice and lies. Detective Laura Simmons held up her hand again, studying the documents more carefully, while the crowd's energy continued to build around them. These documents appear legitimate, and I'd like to make some calls to verify the information before we proceed with any arrests. Sandra Holloway's face flushed deeper red as she sensed control of the situation slipping away. Detective, we don't have time for lengthy investigations. This man is disrupting our business and making our customers uncomfortable. He needs to be removed now so we can return to normal operations. Kurt Langford pointed at the crowd of recording phones surrounding them. Look at the circus this has turned into, officers. Every minute you delay is making this situation worse. We just need him gone so everyone can move on with their day. Tyler Morgan watched the debate continue around him, noting how desperately the security team was pushing for his immediate removal without any investigation. The pattern of behavior was becoming clearer with every exchange, and he realized this incident was revealing systematic problems that went far beyond individual prejudice. Detective Laura Simmons looked between the documents and Tyler Morgan's calm demeanor, clearly recognizing that something about the security team's urgent demands didn't align with the evidence before her. I'm going to need a few minutes to verify this information, Detective Laura Simmons announced, pulling out her phone to make some calls. The crowd waited in tense silence as Tyler Morgan realized the moment of truth was approaching. He could allow the investigation to proceed slowly, or he could take control of the situation immediately. The weight of the decision pressed down on him as he considered the broader implications of what was happening. Tara Nolan's live stream viewer count continued climbing as word spread across social media about the confrontation unfolding in real time. The Bright Mall atrium had become an impromptu courtroom where justice and prejudice were battling for supremacy. Tyler Morgan pulled out his own phone with deliberate calm, scrolling through his contacts while everyone watched. The leather portfolio remained open beside him, its contents representing the power to end this injustice immediately. He found the number he needed and pressed call, his voice carrying clearly across the silent atrium as everyone strained to hear. "Christine, it's Tyler. I need you and Calvin to come to Premier Plaza immediately. Bring all the ownership documentation and corporate identification. We have a situation that requires immediate resolution." The crowd stirred as Tyler Morgan's words hung in the air, and Sandra Holloway's confident expression began to waver as she processed the implications of what she had just heard. The electric tension in the mall atrium reached a breaking point as Tyler Morgan ended his phone call. His calm demeanor remained unchanged, but something in his posture suggested the game was about to shift dramatically. Kurt Langford tightened his grip on his radio, while Sandra Holloway crossed her arms in her red blazer, both convinced they had the situation under control. Officer Mike Brennan adjusted his long-sleeved uniform and prepared to move forward with the detention. But Detective Laura Simmons held up a cautionary hand. The crowd of onlookers pressed closer, their phones capturing every moment as Tara Nolan's live stream continued to gain viewers by the second. "You can call whoever you want," Kurt Langford sneered, his voice carrying across the bright atrium. "But you're still not shopping here today, and these officers are going to make sure of that." Tyler Morgan simply nodded, checking his watch. They should be here any minute. The fluorescent lighting overhead cast everything in sharp relief as shoppers continued to gather. Eleanor Cross stood firmly beside Tyler Morgan, her weathered hands clutched around her purse, while Brandon Walsh watched nervously from behind a nearby kiosk. The teenage employee's discomfort was palpable as he witnessed the injustice unfolding before him. Sandra Holloway stepped closer to Officer Mike Brennan. "I'm telling you, this man is causing a disturbance. He's been aggressive and threatening since the moment he tried to force his way into our establishment. We have every right to refuse service to anyone who doesn't meet our standards." Detective Laura Simmons frowned at the supervisor's choice of words. "What exactly do you mean by standards?" Before Sandra Holloway could respond, the sound of rapid footsteps echoed through the mall. A woman in a sharp orange business suit appeared, her heels clicking authoritatively against the polished floor. Behind her walked a tall, muscular man in a blue jacket, his bearing suggesting security or law enforcement background. Both carried leather briefcases and moved with obvious urgency. Christine Baxter, Tyler Morgan's executive assistant, surveyed the scene with professional composure, despite the chaos. Her eyes quickly assessed the situation, her boss surrounded by security guards, police officers, and a growing crowd of recording spectators. Calvin Reed, Tyler Morgan's head of security, immediately positioned himself strategically, while his trained eyes cataloged every face and potential threat. "Mr. Morgan," Christine Baxter said, her voice carrying clearly across the atrium, "I apologize for the delay. We came as quickly as possible." Kurt Langford's expression shifted slightly at the respectful tone, but he maintained his aggressive stance. "Ma'am, you need to step back. This man is trespassing, and we're handling the situation." Christine Baxter opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency, withdrawing a thick folder of documents. "Officer, I believe there's been a significant misunderstanding. I'm Christine Baxter, executive assistant to Tyler Morgan, who is the owner and CEO of Premier Plaza Properties." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Officer Mike Brennan's hand moved away from his belt, while Detective Laura Simmons stepped forward with renewed interest. The crowd's murmur grew louder as people strained to hear and understand what was happening. "That's impossible," Sandra Holloway said, her voice lacking its previous conviction. "The owner is, we would have been notified." Calvin Reed opened his own briefcase, revealing additional documentation, photographs, and what appeared to be building schematics. His muscular frame and professional demeanor commanded immediate respect as he began laying out papers on a nearby bench. Christine Baxter handed the first set of documents to Detective Laura Simmons. "These are the ownership papers for Premier Plaza, filed with the city and county. Mr. Tyler Morgan has owned this property for 7 years and currently operates 12 similar shopping centers across 3 states. Detective Laura Simmons examined the documents carefully, her trained eye recognizing authentic legal paperwork. The official seals, notarized signatures, and governmental stamps were clearly legitimate. She looked up at Tyler Morgan with new understanding. "Why didn't you identify yourself earlier?" she asked. Tyler Morgan's voice remained calm and dignified. "I was conducting an unscheduled assessment of customer service at one of my properties. I wanted to see how my employees treat ordinary customers. Unfortunately, I discovered exactly what I suspected." Kurt Langford's face flushed red as the implications began to sink in. Those papers could be fake. Anyone can print documents these days. I'm not falling for some elaborate scam. At that moment, another figure burst through the crowd. Robert Fenn, the mall's general manager, appeared in a state of obvious panic. His orange shirt was wrinkled, and his breathing was labored as if he had been running. Behind him trailed two additional staff members, their expressions mixing confusion and fear. "Mr. Morgan," Robert Fenn called out, pushing past startled shoppers. "Sir, I received your assistant's call. I was in the corporate office reviewing quarterly reports. I had no idea you were visiting today." The general manager's arrival sent shockwaves through the assembled group. Sandra Holloway's red blazer seemed to deflate as her supervisor confirmed what she desperately hoped wasn't true. Kurt Langford's aggressive posture wavered as the reality of his situation became undeniable. Robert Fenn approached Tyler Morgan with obvious deference, completely ignoring the security guards who had been harassing his boss. "Sir, I am profoundly sorry for whatever has happened here. If I had known you were conducting a site visit." "That's exactly the point, Robert," Tyler Morgan replied. "I wanted to see how my employees behave when they think no one important is watching." Christine Baxter handed additional documents to Officer Mike Brennan, who studied them with growing amazement. Corporate tax records, business licenses, insurance policies, and bank statements all confirmed Tyler Morgan's identity as the owner of not just this mall, but an entire commercial real estate empire. Calvin Reed finished arranging his documentation and stood to his full height. "I've been Mr. Morgan's head of security for 5 years. I've never seen him treated with such blatant disrespect and discrimination. I'll be documenting every detail of this incident for our legal team." The crowd's energy shifted dramatically as word spread through the gathered shoppers. Phones continued recording as people realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. Tara Nolan adjusted her live stream angle to capture the unfolding revelation, her viewer count climbing into the thousands. Sandra Holloway's face had gone pale. Her earlier confidence completely evaporated. "Mr. Morgan, there's been a terrible misunderstanding. If I had known who you were..." "But you didn't know," Tyler Morgan replied, his voice remaining steady despite the circumstances. "And that's precisely the problem. You saw a black man in casual clothes and immediately assumed he didn't belong in your high-class establishment." Detective Laura Simmons took control of the situation, her training kicking in as she recognized the serious nature of what had occurred. "Everyone needs to step back and give Mr. Morgan some space. This is now a matter of civil rights and potential discrimination, which requires proper investigation." Kurt Langford made one desperate attempt to salvage the situation. "Look, I was just doing my job. I'm supposed to keep undesirable people out of the mall. Management told us to watch for..." "Watch for what exactly?" Calvin Reed interrupted, his voice carrying a dangerous edge. "Watch for black customers? Watch for people who don't meet your racial profile of acceptable shoppers." The security guard's face flushed deeper red as he realized his words had only made things worse. Around the atrium, shoppers continued recording, their phones capturing every word of his increasingly damaging statements. Christine Baxter approached Officer Mike Brennan with additional paperwork. "Officer, these are Mr. Morgan's identification documents, including his driver's license, passport, and corporate credentials. I think you'll find everything is in perfect order." Officer Mike Brennan examined the identification carefully, comparing the photos to Tyler Morgan's face. The documents were clearly authentic, and the man standing before him was undoubtedly the owner of the mall where this confrontation had taken place. "Sir," Officer Mike Brennan said, addressing Tyler Morgan directly for the first time with appropriate respect, "I apologize for the misunderstanding. If I had realized who you were..." "Officer, the issue isn't who I am," Tyler Morgan replied. The issue is how your initial response was influenced by what I look like. Every customer deserves to be treated with basic dignity, regardless of their race or appearance. Detective Laura Simmons nodded approvingly at Tyler Morgan's measured response. Her experience told her this situation could have escalated into something much worse, and she recognized the remarkable restraint he had shown throughout the ordeal. Robert Fenn approached Sandra Holloway and Kurt Langford, his face grim with the realization of what their actions might cost the company. Both of you need to report to my office immediately. This incident will require a full investigation and immediate disciplinary action. Eleanor Cross, the elderly customer who had defended Tyler Morgan from the beginning, stepped forward with obvious satisfaction. I've been shopping at malls for 50 years, and I've never seen such disgraceful behavior from employees. This young man has shown more class and dignity than your entire security team. The crowd murmured agreement, many nodding as they continued to record the aftermath of the revelation. Brandon Walsh, the teenage employee, finally found his courage and approached Tyler Morgan. "Sir, I work at the electronics store," Brandon Walsh said, his voice shaking slightly. "I wanted to say something earlier, but I was scared I'd lose my job. What they did to you was wrong, and I'm sorry." Tyler Morgan placed a gentle hand on the young man's shoulder. "Thank you for speaking up now. It takes courage to do the right thing, especially when you're afraid of consequences." Calvin Reed finished photographing the scene and documenting the positions of everyone involved. His security background made him methodical in preserving evidence that might be needed later for legal proceedings or corporate disciplinary action. Christine Baxter organized her paperwork and prepared to brief Tyler Morgan on the next steps. "Sir, I've contacted our legal team and HR department. They're prepared to begin immediate investigation and response protocols." The mall atrium buzzed with activity as the implications of Tyler Morgan's identity spread throughout the crowd. Shoppers who had witnessed the discrimination felt vindicated in their support, while those who had remained silent seemed uncomfortable with their inaction. Sandra Holloway made one final desperate attempt to minimize her role. "Mr. Morgan, please understand that I was just supporting my security team. I never intended any personal offense." "The offense was never personal," Tyler Morgan replied. "It was systemic. It was based on assumptions about who belongs in certain spaces and who doesn't. That's what makes it so much more serious than a simple misunderstanding." Detective Laura Simmons completed her preliminary assessment of the situation and approached Tyler Morgan with professional respect. "Sir, you've handled this situation with remarkable composure. Do you wish to pursue formal complaints or legal action against the individuals involved?" Tyler Morgan considered the question carefully, his eyes surveying the crowd of customers who had witnessed the entire ordeal. "Detective, my primary concern is ensuring this never happens again to any customer at any of my properties." The transformation in the atrium was complete. Where moments before there had been tension and conflict, now there was anticipation for justice and change. The power dynamics had reversed so completely that Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway seemed smaller, diminished by the revelation of their target's true identity. As Tyler Morgan prepared to address the crowd and take control of his property, the morning sunlight continued streaming through the glass doors, illuminating a scene that would transform not just one mall, but potentially an entire approach to customer service and human dignity in retail spaces across the country. The fluorescent lights of the mall atrium cast everything in sharp relief as Tyler Morgan stepped forward, his green t-shirt and dark jeans somehow commanding more respect than any expensive suit could have managed. The crowd that had gathered to witness his humiliation now watched in stunned silence as the power dynamic shifted completely. Christine Baxter stood beside him, her red blazer a stark contrast to the subdued expressions of Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway, who looked like deer caught in headlights. Tyler Morgan raised his hand, and the murmur of voices died down immediately. When he spoke, his voice carried the quiet authority of someone who had never needed to shout to be heard. "Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for your patience during this unfortunate incident." His words were measured, each syllable delivered with the precision of someone who understood the weight of the moment. "What happened here today is unacceptable, and it ends now." Robert Fenn stepped forward nervously, his face flushed with embarrassment and panic. "Mr. Morgan, I cannot begin to express how deeply sorry I am. This never should have happened. We'll conduct a full investigation immediately." Tyler Morgan nodded slowly, his eyes scanning the crowd, before settling on Kurt Langford, who had gone pale beneath the overhead lighting. "Before we discuss investigations, I want to address what everyone here witnessed. No one should ever be treated the way I was treated today, regardless of who they are or what they look like." Sandra Holloway attempted to interject, her red blazer wrinkled from the stress of the situation. "Mr. Morgan, please understand, we were just following protocol. We had no way of knowing protocol." Tyler Morgan's voice remained calm, but there was steel beneath the surface. "What protocol instructs you to tell someone they don't belong in a high-class establishment? What protocol teaches you to judge customers based on their appearance?" Donna Pierce had arrived moments earlier, her blue jacket indicating her authority as HR director. She stepped forward with a tablet in her hands, already documenting the incident. "Mr. Morgan, we're prepared to take immediate action. I've reviewed the preliminary reports and witness statements." Detective Laura Simmons moved closer, her long-sleeved uniform crisp despite the chaos of the morning. "Mr. Morgan, I want to personally apologize for the initial response. Your restraint throughout this entire situation has been remarkable." Officer Mike Brennan, looking distinctly uncomfortable, cleared his throat. "Sir, I should have investigated more thoroughly before taking any action. The way this escalated was completely inappropriate on our part." Tyler Morgan acknowledged both officers with a nod before turning his attention to the crowd. His eyes found Tara Nolan, who was still recording everything on her phone, her children watching wide-eyed from behind her. "I want to especially thank the customers who stood up for what was right today." "Mrs. Cross," he said, looking toward the elderly woman who had defended him earlier, "your courage in speaking up when others remain silent means more than you know." Eleanor Cross stepped forward, her blue jacket marking her age, but her spine straight with dignity. "Young man, what happened to you was wrong, and I'm proud to shop at a place owned by someone with your character. You handled this with more grace than many would have managed." The crowd murmured their agreement, and several people nodded approvingly. Tyler Morgan's gaze shifted to Brandon Walsh, the teenage employee who had been watching everything with obvious distress. "Brandon, isn't it?" Tyler Morgan asked, and the young man's eyes widened in surprise. "I noticed your discomfort with what was happening. That reaction tells me exactly the kind of employee we want representing Premier Plaza." Brandon stammered, "I wanted to say something, but I didn't know what to do. It felt wrong, all of it." "That instinct serves you well," Tyler Morgan replied. "We'll be talking more about how employees can report concerns without fear of retaliation." Kurt Langford, who had been silent since his world collapsed around him, suddenly found his voice. "Look, Mr. Morgan, you have to understand my position. I see suspicious people all the time. I was just doing my job, protecting the mall from potential troublemakers." The crowd shifted uncomfortably, and several people looked at Kurt Langford with disgust. Tyler Morgan's expression didn't change, but his voice carried a weight that silenced everyone present. "Suspicious based on what, exactly? My skin color? My clothing? The fact that I carried a leather portfolio?" Tyler Morgan stepped closer, and Kurt Langford instinctively backed up. "You didn't see a potential troublemaker. You saw a black man who you decided didn't belong in your space." "That's not—" "I never said anything about race," Kurt Langford protested weakly. "You didn't have to say it explicitly," Tyler Morgan replied. "When you told me to go to Walmart instead, when you called for backup before I'd done anything wrong, when you refused to listen when I tried to explain my presence here, what message do you think that sent?" Sandra Holloway tried one more time to salvage the situation. "Mr. Morgan, perhaps we can discuss this privately. There might have been some miscommunication." "Miscommunication?" Tyler Morgan's eyebrows rose slightly. "You called this a high-class establishment and suggested I didn't belong here. You refused to let me speak with management. You threatened to have me arrested for trespassing in my own building. Which part was miscommunicated?" Christine Baxter stepped forward with her tablet, pulling up security footage from the incident. Mr. Morgan, I've reviewed the recordings from multiple angles. Everything is documented clearly. Donna Pierce nodded grimly. Based on what I've witnessed and the evidence available, I'm recommending immediate suspension, pending a full investigation for both Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway. Suspension? Kurt Langford's voice cracked. I've worked here for 3 years. I was protecting mall property. Tyler Morgan turned to address him directly, his voice never rising, but carrying absolute authority. In 3 years, how many other people have you treated this way? How many customers have you profiled and harassed? How many complaints were filed that somehow never reached the right people? Robert Fenn shifted uncomfortably. Sir, we'll be conducting a comprehensive review of all security incidents and customer complaints. See that you do, Tyler Morgan replied. Because what happened today tells me this isn't an isolated incident. This level of comfort with discrimination doesn't develop overnight. Calvin Reed, who had been quietly documenting everything, approached with his own tablet. Mr. Morgan, I've already identified several other incidents involving both Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway that warrant investigation. Tara Nolan spoke up from the crowd, her phone still recording. Mr. Morgan, this live stream has been shared thousands of times already. People are calling you a hero for how you've handled this. I'm not a hero, Tyler Morgan replied firmly. I'm someone who expects basic human decency, and that shouldn't be heroic. What's heroic is customers like Mrs. Cross speaking up when they see injustice. What's heroic is employees like Brandon recognizing when something is wrong, even if they feel powerless to stop it. Detective Laura Simmons addressed the crowd. What we've witnessed here today is how conflicts should be resolved. Mr. Morgan's response has been measured, fair, and focused on preventing future incidents rather than simply seeking revenge. Tyler Morgan nodded appreciatively before addressing everyone present. Effective immediately, Premier Plaza will be implementing new customer service protocols. Every employee will receive comprehensive training on unconscious bias, de-escalation techniques, and cultural sensitivity. We'll be establishing anonymous reporting systems for customers who feel they've been discriminated against. The crowd began to applaud, but Tyler Morgan held up his hand. This isn't about applause. This is about ensuring that every person who walks through these doors feels welcome and respected, regardless of their race, their clothing, or their appearance. Kurt Langford made one final attempt to defend himself. Mr. Morgan, I swear I would have treated anyone the same way if they looked suspicious. This wasn't about race. Tyler Morgan studied him for a long moment before responding. Kurt, I want you to think very carefully about your answer to this question. In your 3 years here, have you ever blocked a well-dressed white man from entering the mall based solely on your suspicions about his intentions? The silence stretched uncomfortably as Kurt Langford struggled to find an answer that wouldn't incriminate him further. Have you ever told a white customer to shop somewhere else because they didn't belong in a high-class establishment? Tyler Morgan continued. Have you ever called for backup and threatened arrest for a white person who was simply trying to enter the building? Kurt Langford's shoulders sagged in defeat. No, sir. Then let's stop pretending this wasn't about race, Tyler Morgan said simply. Acknowledgement is the first step toward change. Donna Pierce stepped forward with official paperwork. Mr. Langford, Ms. Holloway, you're both suspended, effective immediately, pending a full investigation. You'll need to surrender your security equipment and access cards. As the crowd began to disperse, many people approached Tyler Morgan to shake his hand or express their support. Tara Nolan stopped recording her live stream and spoke directly to him. Mr. Morgan, you've turned something terrible into an opportunity for real change. That takes incredible strength. It takes community, Tyler Morgan replied, looking around at the people who had supported him. Change doesn't happen in isolation. It happens when people like you document injustice, when people like Mrs. Cross speak up, when young people like Brandon trust their instincts about right and wrong. Eleanor Cross approached one more time, her blue jacket catching the fluorescent light. Young man, you've given this old woman hope that things really can change for the better. Tyler Morgan smiled genuinely for the first time all morning. Mrs. Cross, people like you have been fighting these battles long before I ever faced one. I'm just trying to build on the foundation you've already laid. As the immediate crowd dispersed and the mall began to return to normal operations, Tyler Morgan stood with his team in the bright atrium. The morning sunlight still streamed through the glass doors, but the atmosphere had completely transformed. "This is just the beginning," he told Christine Baxter. Calvin Reed and the others gathered around him. "We're going to use this incident as a catalyst for change across every Premier Plaza location. No one should ever have to experience what happened here today." The sound of normal mall activity began to resume around them. But Tyler Morgan knew that nothing would ever be quite the same. The events of this morning had revealed systemic problems that demanded systematic solutions, and he was determined to ensure that his moment of humiliation became a turning point for everyone who would walk through these doors in the future. As Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway were escorted away, their expressions showed the weight of consequences they never thought they would face. But Tyler Morgan's focus had already shifted beyond punishment toward the harder work of creating lasting change that would prevent future incidents and ensure that Premier Plaza truly became a place where everyone was welcome. The fluorescent lights of the mall's administrative office cast a bright, sterile glow as Donna Pierce spread the termination documents across the polished conference table. Her red blazer contrasted sharply with the stark white papers that would end 2 careers within the hour. Tyler Morgan sat quietly in his green t-shirt and dark jeans, watching as his HR director prepared to execute the most justified firings of her career. "Mr. Morgan, I need you to understand that despite what these individuals did to you personally, we're following proper termination procedures," Donna Pierce explained, her voice steady and professional. "Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway will receive due process, even though their actions were inexcusable." Tyler Morgan nodded, his leather portfolio resting on the table beside him. "That's exactly what I want, Donna. We do this right. We document everything. And we make sure this kind of discrimination never happens again in any of my properties." Christine Baxter entered the conference room, her orange blouse bright under the overhead lighting. She carried a stack of legal documents and her phone buzzed constantly with calls from the legal team. "Tyler, I've coordinated with our attorneys. They're reviewing all the footage and witness statements. Detective Simmons has provided additional documentation for potential legal action." The systematic dismantling of the discriminatory behavior was beginning, and Tyler Morgan felt a sense of justice that went far beyond personal vindication. This was about creating lasting change. Calvin Reed knocked on the conference room door, his muscular frame filling the doorway as he entered with a tablet loaded with security footage. His blue jacket was perfectly pressed, reflecting the professionalism Tyler Morgan demanded from his security team. "Mr. Morgan, you need to see this. I've been reviewing footage from the past 6 months, and Kurt Langford's behavior today wasn't an isolated incident." The tablet screen showed multiple instances of Kurt Langford treating black customers with suspicion and hostility. In one clip, he followed a young black mother through the mall for 20 minutes. In another, he demanded identification from a black teenager who was simply sitting in the food court. The pattern was undeniable and sickening. Sandra Holloway knew about these complaints. Calvin Reed continued, swiping through incident reports. Multiple customers filed complaints against Kurt Langford, and she buried every single one. She actually wrote in one report that the customers were being oversensitive. Tyler Morgan's jaw tightened as he watched the footage. The discrimination he experienced wasn't an aberration. It was part of a systematic pattern of racism that had been allowed to flourish under Sandra Holloway's supervision. The realization that other innocent people had endured similar treatment filled him with a righteous anger that fueled his determination for comprehensive reform. Robert Fenn entered the conference room, his face flushed with embarrassment and shame. The mall general manager had clearly been running, and his orange shirt was slightly wrinkled from the stress of the day. Mr. Morgan, I've been reviewing our hiring practices and supervision protocols. I need to take responsibility for how this situation developed." Tyler Morgan gestured for Robert Fenn to sit down. "Robert, I need to understand how Kurt Langford's behavior became normalized. How did we create an environment where Sandra Holloway felt comfortable covering up discrimination complaints?" The general manager shifted uncomfortably in his chair, the bright fluorescent lights making his nervousness even more apparent. Honestly, Mr. Morgan, I trusted Sandra Holloway to handle security issues. She always presented Kurt Langford as a dedicated employee who was just being thorough. I never looked deeper into the customer complaints because she assured me they were handled appropriately. Christine Baxter looked up from her legal documents, her expression serious. This reveals a fundamental flaw in our oversight systems. We had no independent review process for discrimination complaints. Sandra Holloway was essentially investigating herself. Tyler Morgan stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the mall concourse, where customers were still talking about the earlier confrontation. The natural skylight illuminated the space where his personal humiliation had occurred, but now he saw it differently. It was the place where systematic change would begin. "Donna, I want you to personally conduct the termination meetings," Tyler Morgan said, turning back to face his team. "But first, I'm calling every mall location in our chain. This stops today, everywhere." For the next hour, Tyler Morgan personally called the general managers of all 17 Premier Plaza locations. His voice was calm but commanding as he announced immediate policy changes. Every location would implement mandatory anti-discrimination training within 30 days. Customer complaints about discriminatory treatment would be reviewed by an independent committee. Security protocols would be completely revised to eliminate racial profiling. "This isn't just about Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway," Tyler Morgan explained to the manager of the Chicago location. "This is about creating an environment where every customer feels welcome and respected, regardless of their race, appearance, or economic status." Detective Laura Simmons arrived at the administrative office, her professional demeanor providing a sense of official validation for Tyler Morgan's response. She carried a folder of additional documentation and witness statements from the incident. "Mr. Morgan, I wanted to personally commend your response to this situation," Detective Laura Simmons said, taking a seat at the conference table. "In my experience, discrimination victims often respond with understandable anger. Your focus on systematic change, rather than personal revenge, is remarkable." Tyler Morgan appreciated the detective's acknowledgement, but his mind was already moving beyond the immediate incident. "Detective Simmons, I want to use this experience to create something positive. What resources can you provide to help us train our security staff to recognize and prevent discriminatory behavior?" The detective opened her folder and pulled out several training manuals and contact information. "The police department has partnered with civil rights organizations to develop bias training programs. I can connect you with experts who specialize in corporate discrimination prevention." As the afternoon progressed, the administrative office became a hub of transformative activity. Christine Baxter coordinated with legal teams, while Calvin Reed developed new security protocols. Donna Pierce prepared comprehensive termination documentation, while Robert Fenn worked on implementation timelines for the policy changes. Meanwhile, in the mall concourse, the supportive customers who had witnessed the morning's discrimination were organizing their own response. Tara Nolan, whose live stream had documented the incident, was coordinating with other witnesses to share their experiences and support Tyler Morgan's reform efforts. Eleanor Cross, the elderly customer who had defended Tyler Morgan during the confrontation, approached other shoppers with a petition supporting the mall's new anti-discrimination policies. Her blue jacket made her easily recognizable as she moved through the bright concourse, gathering signatures and sharing her perspective on the morning's events. "What happened to that young man was disgraceful," Eleanor Cross told a group of customers near the food court. "But his response shows real leadership. He's turning a terrible experience into positive change for everyone." Brandon Walsh, the teenage employee who had witnessed the discrimination with obvious discomfort, was summoned to the administrative office. His nervousness was evident as he entered the bright conference room, unsure why the mall owner wanted to speak with him. "Brandon, I noticed your reaction this morning when Kurt Langford was discriminating against me," Tyler Morgan said, his tone kind but serious. "You clearly knew what was happening was wrong, but you felt powerless to intervene. Is that accurate?" The teenager nodded, his voice barely above a whisper. "Yes, sir. I wanted to say something, but Kurt Langford was my supervisor's supervisor. I was scared I'd get fired if I spoke up." Tyler Morgan smiled. recognizing the young man's moral courage despite his fear. "Brandon, I'm promoting you to customer service supervisor, and I'm making you part of our new customer service oversight committee. Your job will be to ensure that no employee ever again feels unable to report discriminatory behavior." The transformation of Brandon Walsh's expression from fear to hope embodied the broader change Tyler Morgan was implementing. Individual empowerment was becoming institutional reform. As the day concluded, Donna Pierce completed the termination proceedings for Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway. Both former employees were escorted from the premises by Calvin Reed. Their discriminatory tenure at Premier Plaza finally ended. The due process Tyler Morgan had insisted upon was complete, and justice had been served systematically and professionally. Christine Baxter compiled the day's developments into a comprehensive report that would be distributed to every Premier Plaza location. The incident that began with personal humiliation had become a catalyst for company-wide transformation. Anti-discrimination policies, bias training programs, independent complaint review processes, and cultural sensitivity initiatives would be implemented across Tyler Morgan's entire business empire. Detective Laura Simmons provided final documentation before leaving, but her parting words captured the broader significance of the day's events. "Mr. Morgan, what happened to you this morning was wrong and illegal, but your response has created something remarkable. You've turned personal injustice into systematic improvement that will protect countless future customers." Tyler Morgan remained in the administrative office as evening approached, reviewing the comprehensive reforms that had emerged from his morning humiliation. The bright fluorescent lights illuminated documents that would reshape how his company operated, ensuring that the discrimination he experienced would become the catalyst for lasting positive change. The leather portfolio that had contained his ownership documents now held the foundation papers for a new anti-discrimination training program that would extend far beyond his mall chain. Personal adversity had become corporate accountability, and individual dignity had sparked systematic transformation. As Tyler Morgan finally prepared to leave the administrative office, he reflected on how a morning of injustice had become an afternoon of empowerment. The discrimination he faced had revealed problems he didn't know existed, and his response was creating solutions that would protect future customers from similar experiences. The bright mall concourse was quieter now, but the changes implemented throughout the day would resonate for years to come. Corporate accountability had replaced discriminatory practices, and Tyler Morgan's business empire was becoming a model for inclusive customer service. Tomorrow would bring the continuation of this transformation, but today had proven that individual courage and systematic reform could emerge from the darkest moments of personal injustice. 6 months had passed since that transformative morning at Premier Plaza, and Tyler Morgan found himself standing once again before the same glass doors where Kurt Langford had first blocked his path. The autumn sunlight streamed through the pristine entrance, casting warm rays across polished floors that now reflected a completely transformed environment. Tyler wore a navy blazer over dark slacks, his presence commanding yet approachable as he prepared to witness the fruits of systematic change. The automatic doors swept open with a gentle whoosh, and immediately Tyler noticed the difference. Marcus Williams, the new head of security, approached with a genuine smile. Marcus wore a crisp uniform with short sleeves that showcased his professional bearing, and his voice carried warmth that had been absent from this space for far too long. "Good morning, Mr. Morgan. Welcome back to Premier Plaza," Marcus said, extending his hand with respect that came from understanding, not fear. Behind him, a diverse team of security personnel moved through the atrium with confidence and courtesy, their interactions with customers reflecting the comprehensive training program Tyler had mandated. The mall buzzed with activity under the bright overhead fluorescent lighting, mixed with natural skylight that illuminated every corner. Families of all backgrounds moved freely through the corridors, children's laughter echoing off walls that had once witnessed discrimination. Tyler paused near the central fountain, remembering how this same spot had been the epicenter of conflict and humiliation just months before. "Tyler," Tara Nolan's voice carried across the atrium as she approached with a clipboard and the same determined energy that had driven her to livestream that fateful confrontation. She wore a red blouse with black pants, her role as community liaison evident in the way she moved through the space with purpose and authority. Everything's ready for the celebration. I can't believe how much has changed since that day. The community event Tara had organized filled the main corridor with display tables showcasing the mall's transformation statistics. Local business owners, community leaders, and customers mingled beneath colorful banners that proclaimed inclusion excellence and community partnership. The energy was electric, charged with the satisfaction of meaningful progress achieved through collective effort. Eleanor Cross emerged from the crowd, her blue jacket pristine as always, but her demeanor radiated the confidence of someone who had discovered her own power to create change. At 73, she had become an unlikely activist, her experience witnessing Tyler's treatment that morning having awakened something fierce within her. "Young man," Eleanor said, her voice carrying the same strength that had challenged Kurt Langford months earlier. "What you started here has rippled through our entire community. I've been working with the city council on anti-discrimination policies, and 3 other businesses have already implemented your training model." Tyler felt a surge of pride, not for his own vindication, but for the way individual courage had sparked collective transformation. Eleanor's activism demonstrated how one moment of standing up for justice could inspire others to examine their own capacity for change. Brandon Walsh appeared beside them, his supervisor badge gleaming under the bright lights. The teenager, who had once felt powerless to intervene, now carried himself with the authority of someone who understood that speaking up was not just a right, but a responsibility. He wore an orange polo shirt with dark slacks, his professional appearance reflecting his growth from uncertain employee to confident leader. "Mr. Morgan, I wanted to show you the customer satisfaction data," Brandon said, pulling out a tablet loaded with colorful charts and graphs. "We've seen a 47% increase in customer satisfaction scores, and our diversity metrics show we're serving customers from 83 different cultural backgrounds." The comment cards specifically mentioned feeling welcomed and respected. The numbers represented more than statistics. They quantified dignity restored and community rebuilt. Tyler reviewed the data while Brandon explained how the new feedback system allowed customers to report concerns directly to management, ensuring that discrimination could never again be systematically ignored or covered up. Detective Laura Simmons joined their circle, her presence at the community celebration highlighting how the mall's transformation had influenced broader institutional change. She wore her uniform with the pride of someone who had witnessed justice prevail through patience and systematic reform rather than conflict and retaliation. "Tyler, I wanted you to know that your response to that incident has become a case study in our police training program," Detective Simmons said, her voice carrying professional respect. "We're teaching officers how to recognize implicit bias and the importance of thorough investigation before making assumptions. Your dignity under pressure showed us what real leadership looks like." The irony was not lost on Tyler that the same law enforcement system that had initially sided with his accusers now used his experience as a teaching tool for better policing. Change, he had learned, could emerge from the most unlikely circumstances when approached with strategic patience and unwavering principle. Christine Baxter approached with her characteristic efficiency, carrying a leather portfolio that contained documents far different from the ownership papers she had rushed to provide 6 months earlier. Today's papers outlined the establishment of the Morgan Foundation for Workplace Equity, a nonprofit organization that would extend the lessons learned at Premier Plaza to businesses nationwide. "The foundation launches officially next week," Christine explained, her red blazer and dark skirt reflecting her executive authority. "We've already received partnership requests from 47 companies wanting to implement our training protocols." The Kurt Langford and Sandra Holloway incident, as painful as it was, has become a catalyst for change we never could have imagined. Tyler nodded thoughtfully, understanding how personal injustice could become the seed of systematic improvement when handled with strategic vision rather than reactive anger. The foundation would ensure that his experience would prevent others from facing similar discrimination, transforming his moment of humiliation into countless others' protection. Robert Fenn, the mall general manager who had scrambled to apologize months earlier, now stood before Tyler with the confidence of someone who had learned profound lessons about leadership and accountability. His green shirt and blue jacket were immaculate, his demeanor reflecting genuine transformation rather than mere compliance. "Tyler, I owe you more than an apology," Robert said, his voice carrying sincerity earned through months of hard work and self-examination. "That day exposed failures in my leadership that I didn't even recognize. The cultural changes we've implemented have made this not just a better workplace, but a better community space. Thank you for showing us what we could become." The afternoon program featured presentations from various community stakeholders who had been inspired by Tyler's response to discrimination. Business leaders discussed policy changes they had implemented. Educators shared new curricula addressing bias and inclusion, and community organizers described programs that had emerged from the collective awakening that followed that morning's confrontation. Tara Nolan took the makeshift stage that had been erected near the fountain, her voice carrying across the gathered crowd with the authority of someone who had documented injustice and helped transform it into progress. Her red blouse caught the light as she gestured toward Tyler, who stood among the community members rather than apart from them. "6 months ago, we witnessed something that challenged all of us to examine our own beliefs and actions," Tara announced, her words carrying across the brightly lit atrium. Tyler Morgan's grace under pressure and commitment to systematic change rather than personal revenge has shown us what real leadership looks like. This mall is now a model for businesses everywhere. The applause that followed was not merely appreciation for Tyler's individual courage, but recognition of collective progress achieved through shared commitment to justice and dignity. The sound echoed off walls that had once witnessed humiliation, but now resonated with hope and determination. As the formal presentations concluded and the crowd began to disperse, Tyler found himself walking the same corridors where Kurt Langford had once blocked his path. The bright overhead lighting illuminated families shopping together, teenagers working with pride in their positions, and elderly customers moving through the space with the confidence that they would be treated with respect, regardless of their appearance or background. Near the electronics store where Sandra Holloway had once made her discriminatory accusations, Tyler paused to watch a young black girl excitedly showing her grandmother a tablet display. The security guard nearby, a Latina woman whose uniform reflected the diversity that now characterized the mall's staff, smiled and offered assistance with genuine warmth. The transformation was complete, but Tyler understood that it was also ongoing. Real change required constant vigilance and continuous commitment, not just policies implemented and forgotten. The Morgan Foundation would ensure that the lessons learned at Premier Plaza would continue spreading, preventing other Tyler Morgans from facing discrimination and empowering other communities to demand better from their institutions. As evening approached and the natural skylight began to fade, Tyler made his way toward the same exit where his confrontation with Kurt Langford had begun. The circular journey felt symbolic of the way injustice could be transformed into justice when met with strategic patience and unwavering commitment to systematic change. Marcus Williams approached as Tyler neared the doors, his professional demeanor reflecting the respect that should have been present 6 months earlier. "Have a great evening, Mr. Morgan. Thank you for everything you've done for this community." Tyler stepped through the glass doors into the cool autumn air, turning back to look at Premier Plaza one final time. The bright lights inside illuminated a space that had become more than a shopping center. It was now a symbol of what was possible when individuals refused to accept discrimination and committed themselves to creating systematic change. The story that had begun with humiliation and injustice had transformed into something larger than Tyler's individual experience. It had become a testament to the power of dignity under pressure, the importance of community support, and the possibility of turning personal adversity into collective advancement. Walking toward his car, Tyler reflected on how 6 months had changed, not just Premier Plaza, but his understanding of leadership itself. Real power was not the authority to retaliate against those who wronged you, but the wisdom to transform wrongdoing into systematic improvement that prevented others from experiencing similar injustice. The bright mall behind him buzzed with activity, its lights a beacon of what communities could accomplish when they chose progress over prejudice, inclusion over exclusion, and hope over hatred. Tyler Morgan's story had become everyone's story, a reminder that individual dignity could indeed spark the systematic change that society desperately needed. You just heard a story that history tried to overlook. If it stayed with you, take a second to stand with it. Subscribe, share, and help us keep telling the stories that deserve light, not silence.